All right, they always do this in the films. You grab it like this. It feels super clunky. Hello and welcome to this video tutorial brought to you by tutvid.com. I am fired up today because we're going to talk about 15 features and concepts in Photoshop that are going to take you from kind of a novice in Photoshop to being much more of an intermediate or quote-unquote power user, as they like to use in the professional community. Now, I'm not professional, so I don't like to use that term. I like to just call you a buddy who knows how to use Photoshop pretty well. So we're going to cover a bunch of interesting things. This isn't just like creating a smiley face and slapping a stupid bevel and emboss on it and then calling yourself Photoshop Pro or anything like that. This is going to be real, legitimate skills that you can use in Photoshop. I have a feeling the tutorial is going to go on a little long, but I'm going to have a video guide, so you can click ahead and see what's in this tutorial down in the description for this video. Also, I should mention Rode is so kindly providing us with the equipment we're using today to record this tutorial. So we can thank them for the amazing audio quality that we're getting, things like that. And also, oh, by the way, there's a link that should appear, I don't know, somewhere up over here for a link to the tutvid.com website. You can pick up an entire course that I did on how to retouch images. It'll really push your Photoshop game to the next level and help you out. Just by checking out the link, it helps out tutvid.com, helps me create more content like this. I would love it if you would check it out. And, of course, pick up a copy if you feel so inclined. Let's get started with this video. All right, so the first thing in Photoshop is the Photoshop UI. So the UI is the user interface. It's everything that you see here. And this is fairly straightforward. I mean, you've got your tools over here to one side. You've got all these different panels here. You've got a bunch of different menus up here. You can click and open things and work with different things and all that great stuff. But let's talk about panels. So reorganizing panels is fairly simple. You simply click and drag any tab. You pull it. It breaks it away from the other group of panels, and there you go. I can click and drag. When the whole thing highlights blue, I can drop it, and it's going to click itself back in with the rest of the panels. At any time, double-click a tab, and it collapses that panel. See? Double-click to open a little tab up. If one panel is obscenely huge, whoops, let's move that back into where it goes. If one panel is obscenely huge, of course, double-click, collapse it. Let's open layers back up. You can always do things like click any one of these icons to pop out, like, hey, there's the Actions panel. Great. You can drag it right out of there. You can have the Actions panel out here now. I can just, float the Actions over here. If I don't want Actions open, hit the little X and close it. And then if I want Actions again, go Window, Actions, and we have Actions open back up. Now, let's say we've played around with the UI. We love the way it is. It's perfect for us. It's time to save the user interface. Click this little drop-down menu and choose New Workspace. Name it whatever you want. This is it. Whatever. This is T. This is it. There we go. And you can not only save the actual layout of the workspace, but you can also save any keyboard shortcuts you've set, any hotkeys, if you will. You can adjust the menus in Photoshop. You can save that. And also, you can actually get rid of tools on the toolbar. You can save that as well. So you would hit save, and then it would appear just like my little Tutvid workspace. It would appear as a new workspace you can use. Now, when you're working with your workspace, if you make a big mess of it and, crap is all over the place and, there we go, you realize, well, it's the end of the day, time to reset and clean everything up. Just go and choose Reset Workspace Name, and it's going to bring everything back to where it belongs. Now, one of the other great things about the UI is virtually every panel, right? Like here's the Layers panel. They have these little flyout menus attached to them. You click it, you get all kinds of cool little features that have to do with the dialog box. You get the options for that dialog box, and options always contain neat stuff that you can customize and change, like the thumbnail size or how the contents that the thumbnail shows, and some other neat things that can be useful for Photoshop later on down the road. I'm going to drag this guy right back into there and place him in there. Oh, by the way, if I have this out and I want to just make like a new box over here, so I want channels to stay there, I don't want layers to sit next to channels, I can click and drag and hover between two boxes. See that solid blue line? Let go. Layers is now sort of its own little module, if you will, just floating in place, but I want it to sit next to channels, so there we have it. Now, as we go through all these features and concepts in Photoshop, I want to talk about some common mistakes that I see. So I'm going to try to hit like one common mistake per 15 things. Now, the common mistake that I see with the UI is people ignoring the preferences, Photoshop preferences interface. Now, on the PC, this would be Edit Photoshop interface, Edit Preferences interface. There we go. But anyway, get to the Preferences dialog box. Under Interface, you can customize the entire color theme of Photoshop. Now, I prefer working in a very dark UI, so I go with like the darkest or the second darkest. You can change all kinds of things down here. That can be cool. Hit OK. You can also right-click on your artboard out here, or your working canvas, whatever you want to call it, and choose like different colors, black, light gray. You can even go custom, and but you can set the custom color by hitting Set Custom Color. Do a yellow, play a prank on your buddy, and he'll think Photoshop's broken. But then, of course, you can right-click and go right back to dark gray, and everything is fine and well with the world again. So that's the Photoshop UI. Now let's move on to file handling and like the concept of the PSD. So a PSD is generally the file that you're going to be working with in Photoshop. It allows you to have things like multiple layers and save those multiple layers. The PSD is not like your JPEG or your PNG web graphic or GIF animation file. It's not any of that. It's a working file that you're going to use when you're working in Photoshop, and then you export a JPEG out from that PSD. The PSD you would not display on your website because, like Google Chrome, Mozilla Firefox, they aren't going to be able to display it. Plus, it's a massive file. You also couldn't upload it to something like Facebook or Reddit or wherever you hang out and make your playground on the web. So you would need to export your PNG or your GIF, your GIF, your whatever, or your JPEG from that PSD. But the PSD is the high-quality, creme de la creme, best of the best file with all of your layers. It's your working file. So it doesn't go out to the web, but a copy of it goes out to the web in the form of an optimized JPEG or PNG or something like that. So now that we understand the concept of the PSD and kind of where it lives, let's talk about creating a new document in Photoshop. File, New. Now here's the important thing, the hotkey. Command or Control N. You're going to use it all the time. Command N on the Mac, Control N on the PC. Set a width, set a height, set a resolution. 72 is a good one for screen. 300 is a good one if you know it's probably going to be printed. Of course, color mode, RGB, CMYK, or LAB/grayscale, whatever you're doing if you're working with any of those color spaces. You can also choose a bit depth. Again, 8-bit is probably fine. Don't overthink it. Just go with the size, a resolution. A 300 pixel per inch resolution image can be used on the web, so you're not going to like mess everything up if you don't choose the right resolution. Again, don't overthink it. Just start making stuff. So one of the other things we can do is drag files into Photoshop. Now you can literally drag files from your file browser like this and drop them right into the open file in Photoshop. I'm going to hit delete because I don't want to do that. You can also go File, Place Embedded. Place Linked is a little bit different the way it works. A little bit more complicated. Quite frankly, a little bit more powerful, but we're not going to get into all that in this tutorial. So Place Embedded, and you choose the same thing. You choose the image you want to import, and it's going to place it right in that file. Now, if you want to drag a photo into Photoshop, and let's call this the common mistake for dealing with files in Photoshop. If I want to drag a file into Photoshop but not have it drop into my open image on the Mac, I grab the image and I drop it on the Photoshop icon. It's going to open it as an image. This image is already open, so it takes me to the open version of that image on my screen. Or on the PC, what you would do is you would, let me get back to the Finder. You would drag your image into Photoshop and drop it up here onto this top bar. So you do that, and the PC will open it as a fresh, clean image in Photoshop. So now let's move on to viewing your documents. So you can see I've got a bunch of different files open in Photoshop here. Kid with the hat, this little app PSD, woman in cafe, yada, yada, yada. We can quickly navigate through our tabbed files by hitting Control-Tab, and that's Control-Tab for the Mac or for the PC. Control-Shift-Tab navigates backward through our list here. If you don't like the tab navigation, you can go Window, Arrange, and choose to float all in Windows. This will take all of our files and float them in windows like that. I don't necessarily like that, so I'm going to go Arrange, Consolidate all to tabs, and it's going to consolidate everything to tabs, not necessarily in the order I had them a moment ago, but hey, it does the job nonetheless. Now, if you want to drag a graphic or an image from one document to another, let's say we want to drag this entire image and drop it into the photo of that woman in the cafe, right, over here. Well, what we can do is simply grab our Move tool, click and drag the image. We're holding, and I'm holding above woman in cafe, and then I simply let go. And now that whole image is over here in woman in cafe. I'm going to hit my delete key. I don't necessarily want that image over here, but I just want to show you how that's done. Let's zoom in on this image here. Let's say we're in here and we're retouching her skin or maybe cleaning up some spots up here, and we need to quickly navigate down to a different part of her body. This is kind of the common mistake that I see when especially beginners are working in Photoshop. You use the sidebars. We really don't want to use the sidebars. They're thin, they're difficult to get a handle on, and it's just really slow. if we're working on this part of her face and we need to get down to like what she's drinking, any tool, it doesn't matter what tool you have selected in Photoshop, any tool you have selected, if you hold down the spacebar key, your cursor temporarily turns into a hand icon, and you can quickly scrub through your image to the part that you want to be, let go of spacebar, and you're back to using whatever tool you were using. So if it's the brush tool and you're, for some reason, painting black, and it's like, oh, we got to get up to her face, and there's not enough, blackness on her forehead. She looks like she doesn't look like she's been working in the coal mine, and we know, well, you know how I feel about that. So we got to put some soot and dust on her forehead, and maybe some down here on her hands, and so on and so forth. You get the point, though. When you're painting or healing, right? Maybe we want to retouch away this freckle or whatever beauty mark, and we can quickly navigate around our image using just hold down the spacebar key. It doesn't matter what tool you're selecting. It temporarily switches to the hand tool, which allows you to just pull and drag and view any part of the open image. So let's talk about layers in Photoshop. Layers, the easiest way to explain them, if I can get my microphone straight here, is like a big sandwich. You got your bread, you've got a protein, you've got like a condiment, mayo, mustard, whatever, maybe some vegetables, some cheese, some tomatoes, some a little this, a little that, a little, you know what I mean, bada bing, boom, and you got a sandwich. Layer, 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 layer. That's exactly how a PSD works. So let's check it out in practice here. So we're going to stick here with this woman in the cafe image, and over in your layers panel, you can hit the new layer icon. It's going to create a new layer. On this new layer, we can, I just have the brush tool here, but we can paint whatever we like, just a bunch of squigglies here. And if we realize we don't want them, well, they're not actually locked into our image. They're up on their own layer. We can shut that layer off by clicking the little icon. We can turn the layer back on by clicking the icon. We can duplicate the layer by using the hotkey Command or Control J, or simply by clicking and dragging the layer and dropping it on the new layer icon. Delete a layer by just selecting it and hitting the delete or backspace key. Or of course, you can just drag the layer down to the garbage can. One of the other things you can do with layers is you can reduce the layer opacity. So you can click this little drop down, use this slider, and you can see the contents of the layer become see-through, depending on how opaque or transparent you wish them to be. We also have these things called layer styles. Layer styles are pretty cool because they allow you to blend the artwork on your layer with the underlying layers in a variety of different ways. So you can use them to intensify contrast, you can use them to brighten or darken, or kind of anything in between, change color, all kinds of stuff like that. So let's just, let's delete this layer. Let's create a new layer here. I'll show you what I mean. I'm going to drag this down to the garbage can. Let's create a new layer, and from the swatches panel, I'm going to select like, I don't know, a hot pink as my color. So hot pink is now my foreground color, so I'm painting with hot pink. I'm going to paint just a line straight down from her hair down to her blouse or shirt here. I'm going to use the hotkey multiply, or the blend mode multiply. Now multiply and all of these blend modes here tend to darken the image. They all work with the currently selected layer. They blend it with the layers beneath in a darkening way, I guess is the best way to put it. Whereas these, the group with screen and lighten, they kind of brighten things. You can see how it's blending it, but now it's, brightening everything up. Everything here with overlay and soft light down to hard mix, these all primarily will affect the contrast of your layers. So they kind of really add some va-va-voom, if you will. Now it really kind of blows her skin out, makes her look, not all that great. Soft light is like a lightened, not so intense version of overlay. A difference in exclusion, subtract, divide, and the hue, saturation, color. We're not going to get into them right now. I would recommend you play with all of these blend modes. Become familiar with them. You're going to use them more probably than any of the other blend modes, especially if you're doing web graphic work or retouching, things like that. You're going to use blend modes quite often. Digital artwork as well, I should add. You can also apply what are called layer styles to any layer by going layer, layer style, and let's just go blending options. This is going to open our layer style dialog box. You can apply stuff like a bevel and emboss. It gives us this really not so flattering looking bit of artwork, but if you've never used it before, and click on bevel and emboss, by the way, to get to all of the settings and options you can change. If you've never used it before, yeah, it looks pretty impressive. You can tick on, tick off preview to see what you're getting. I'm going to shut off bevel and emboss. You can also go with like a drop shadow and apply a drop shadow beneath this, change the angle of the drop shadow, change the distance of the drop shadow, maybe make the drop shadow more blurry by adjusting the size. So all kinds of things like that. Change the color of the drop shadow. Again, you have a blend mode here, an opacity slider, so you can really affect how the drop shadow blends with the image over which it is placed. I'm going to shut that off though. I would urge you to come into the layer styles and play around with them. We're going to touch on layer styles again in just a moment. But before we do, you can also group multiple layers together like we saw over in the PSD. So let's just duplicate this layer, drag it down to the new layer icon. I'm going to pull it down over here. We can select both layers, hold down the Shift key, and just click and select one layer and select the other. Command or Control G groups them. And now we have a layer group. We can name it lines or whatever we want. You can apply a blend mode to an entire layer group, or you can reduce the opacity of an entire layer group. So layer groups can be really useful. They just help you keep things organized. You can always right-click and choose Ungroup Layers. It's going to delete the group, but not the layers within it. So that can be helpful. I'm going to delete this layer that we just created. Now, the common mistake that I see with layers, and particularly really layer styles, I'm going to double-click here out in this open area of my layer. By the way, you can double-click the layer name to change the layer, name or to rename it. If you double-click over in this open area, it's going to open your layer style dialog box. Using bevel and emboss is very overdone by people who are somewhat new to Photoshop. And I don't mean to like shovel this in your face and say that you're terrible at Photoshop. Maybe a little bit. But, you know, hey, we all suck at one point. Don't worry. Even the greats, and I'm not a great, but even the greats were awful at one point. So don't be discouraged. But one of the things that a lot of newer Photoshop users tend to do is slap bevel and emboss on a lot of stuff, slap drop shadows on a lot of stuff, because it's impressive and it's powerful and it feels good to do it because it's new to you. So what I would recommend is go in, play with Photoshop, get past that a little bit before you start trying to apply it to client work. It's just a bad look. It really doesn't look professional anymore. I actually don't know if it ever did look professional, but it really doesn't look professional now. But too much bevel and emboss is a no-go. So next, let's talk about selection tools. I'm just going to delete this big pink line. Let's use this image right here. I want to talk about selection tools. So part of the beautiful thing about Photoshop, part of what makes it an incredibly powerful image processor and graphics creator is the ability to create selections, the ability to work on a specific part of an image and not touch anything else. We do that with selections. By selecting something like here in this image, maybe we just want to change the color of her shirt. We can do that. Maybe we want to add a graphic to the screen of this iPad. We can do that. Select her hair and change the color of her hair. We can do that. But if we just go and wholesale change the color of everything, well, let me just show you what happens. I'm going to pop open Hue Saturation hotkey, by the way, Command or Control U. We can change the color, and we can give her like this blue hair, but then obviously, as you can see, everything's messed up. If we could constrain that to just her hair by first selecting her hair, well, hey, wouldn't that be beautiful? It would. I mean, maybe not the hair. It's a little eccentric for me, but hey, to each his own. The selections begin with the marquee tools. Let's grab the rectangular marquee tool, and here's how it works. You simply click and drag a selection. Now, I've got rounded corners. That's because we have feathering applied to our selection. Feathering just means that if you fill this with a color, so if I fill it with the pink here, Alt, Backspace, Option, Delete on the Mac, it's going to have kind of this fuzzy edge. I don't want that. I'm going to deselect my selection by hitting Command or Control D. By the way, a very important hotkey, deselect. I think it was the first hotkey I ever learned in Photoshop. Command or Control D. You're going to use it all the time. It'll just become like muscle memory. You won't even realize you're using it. So what we're going to do is we're going to set our feather to the default, which by the way is 0, and this allows us to create a hard-edged selection. Now, when you have a selection tool selected, like the rectangular marquee tool, you can click and drag within your selection to move that selection around. Here's an important distinction. If we grab the Move tool and we click and drag, we're actually going to move the pixels that are being selected. So if you need to move your selection, you really want to make sure that you have your rectangular marquee tool selected. It's going to save you so much frustration. Now, what if we want to add to this selection? We want to make the selection bigger. We can simply hold down our Shift key and click and drag, and we make our selection bigger and bigger and bigger. Now, if we want to get rid of some of the selection, hold down our Alt or Option key and just select a big chunk of it, and voila, we've gotten rid of a big, lunken part of our selection, and we're just left this little rectangle. Again, let's hit Command or Control D to deselect. Now, as you're dragging out a selection, maybe you haven't gotten the selection just perfect. Simply hold down your spacebar key, and you can move the selection around and then drop it exactly where you need it to go. And then you place your selection right where it needs to be without having to worry about creating a selection. Oh, it's not the right size. Command or Control D to deselect. Let me try to get it again. Oh, I messed it up again. You can just move as you're creating the selection to get the perfect selection the first time, every time. So one of the other things we can do with these rectangular, and by the way, there's an elliptical marquee tool, you have these lasso tools, you have this quick selection tool, and the magic wand tool, which is, I don't really use it much. But the quick selection tool can be useful for just like painting over an area like her sweater here and saying, quickly select all of that. It does an okay job. You usually have to go in and refine it a little bit, but let's not get off course here. With something like the rectangular marquee tool, Under the Style drop-down menu, you can choose a fixed size. Let's just go with 1,000 pixels by 450 pixels. Click it. You don't even have to click and drag. You just drop it, and it's automatically 1,000 pixels wide by 450 pixels tall, and you have your selection. Command or Control D to deselect. Actually, I'm going to drop a selection out here. Again, to fill a selection, you can just hit Alt backspace. That is Option Delete on the Mac, and it fills that. And again, if we use our skills that we learned before about layers, simply create a new layer first. Fill that shape on a new layer. Command or Control D to deselect. We can grab like our Move tool, and we've created this pink box that we can move around, and it's up on its own layer. We can delete it at any time we like by hitting the delete key. Now, the common mistake that I'll see with folks who are using the marquee tools is sometimes you have a selection active in your document, like a little tiny selection, which is very difficult to see, or maybe you've accidentally hit Command or Control H while you have it selected so the marching ants disappear, Command or Control H to bring those marching ants back, and then you grab like your brush tool and you just want to paint. Well, nothing is appearing. It seems to me like the brush tool is broken. Instead of freaking out, just go like select and hit deselect. That way, if there's anything that's selected, it'll just deselect it. And sometimes it can be very tricky because, like if you do 50 pixels for a feather and you create a tiny little selection, Photoshop's going to say, look, no pixels more than 50% are selected. The selection edges will not be visible. Hit OK. There is something there. In fact, if I take the brush tool and I paint over it, we can see we're painting like a little pink area only right there because it's selected. So you want to make sure that you just go ahead and go select, deselect if you're painting and nothing's happening, because see now when I paint, it paints lines everywhere. So make sure that you don't have a little hidden selection selected somewhere that you don't know about and is preventing you from doing anything in Photoshop. All right, so next up is the Move tool. Now, the Move tool, I'm going to go back to the PSD, if I can find it. There it is. The Move tool allows us to actually move pixels, but if we select layers in the Layers panel, or entire layer groups, in fact, so here we have Nav bar, if we just click and drag, you can see we're moving this whole navigation area of the image. We're going to go up to View, Show, and shut off these smart guides. We're going to touch on them in a second, and then I'm going to drag that and pop it right back up into place at the top of the document. Maybe move it over just a little bit. So we can actually descend within this, or maybe let's go down here to the albums and go to the Of the Past. And you can see if I select the Of the Past layer group, I can drag that whole area around wherever I like. Or I can just select an individual layer, like the Of the Past text. See, it's a text layer. I can shut it off, turn it on. I can use my arrow keys to navigate, or not navigate, to nudge a graphic or a piece of text or an image or whatever I want around. And if you hold down your Shift key, by the way, you can nudge it in larger increments. So I'm nudging it up and down. You can go right, you can go left, you can do whatever. With the Move tool, you can click and drag and hold down the Shift key and constrain to go straight up and down, or go straight left or right, or even like on a 45-degree angle either way, depending on what you want to do. I'm going to undo that stuff. So the Move tool can be very, very useful for just generally moving things around. With just about any object in Photoshop, you can hold down the Alt or Option key, click and drag, and you pull a copy of that out. In fact, you can see it duplicated that layer for us. So we have two Of the Past text layers. I don't want that. I'm just going to hit the Delete key and get rid of it. Now, one of the other things you can do with the Move tool, and I think it often goes unnoticed, especially initially when you first start using Photoshop, is the fact that you can align with the Move tool in a couple ways, but let's take a look at the more obvious way. Let's take this Of the Past text, and let's just move it straight to the right like that. But we know it needs to be aligned to the vertical center perfectly. Well, here's what we do. We go Select, Select All, and look up here in our control bar for the Move tool. We have all of these alignment icons that have lit up. So we can say, all right, well, we can align to the centers of the document. I guess it would be there you go, the vertical centers. We don't want that. I'm going to Command or Control Z to undo. We can go align to the vertical or the horizontal centers, excuse me, like that, and it's going to move Of the Past text right into the perfect middle of our document. Command or Control D to deselect, and there we have it. Now, one of the common mistakes I see people making with the Move tool is more like a personal preference thing. Some of you will love it. Some of you will absolutely hate it. Under View, I shut them off before. View, Show, Smart Guides. I love smart guides. I think they're so useful. They give you these sort of heads-up guides as you're moving around. You can see here, like I can drag this over and align it perfectly with the edge of the 28 photos, right? So it'll tell me like right there, I'm aligned perfectly with the edge of 28 photos, and now my text I know is lined up well. I can line this up with the right side of the subscribe button, whatever it is. I keep kind of just messing it up. But smart guides can help you so much and sort of almost automatically guide you into aligning objects and shapes and images, whatever it is in your Photoshop document, very, very quickly. It does all kinds of cool measuring things. Very, very useful to have it turned on. But again, if it's something that you're not doing a lot of, it also can get pretty annoying having all these lines appearing, all these little pixel markers telling you different measurements and things. So if you don't like it, you can always go View, like I said, View, Show, Smart Guides, right? View, Show, Smart Guides, and get rid of it. So that's the Move tool. So next up, we have shape tools. Now, shape tools in Photoshop are pretty cool, and you might think, oh, this is pretty obvious. They allow you to draw shapes. They do a bit more than that. See, when you select a shape tool, and by the way, you've got rectangle, rounded rectangle, circles, polygon, which can also be converted to a star, a line tool, which can be a little confusing to use, especially initially, and also custom shape tool, which gives you all these cool custom shapes here. By the way, if you don't have all of these loaded in, hit the little flyout menu and choose to load all. Be a nice little hack. So I'm just going to stick with the straight rectangle tool. Now with these tools, you can choose to create a shape, a path, or pixels. We're not going to touch on path. Shape is a path-based shape, so technically it is creating a path, but it's a filled path and an entire shape layer. Again, if you're new to Photoshop, that might sound more confusing than it is. Just try not to obsess over the details. Start doing it, and the more you do it, you'll begin to understand how it all works. Let's begin with pixels, though, because it's pretty simple. Doing this, you simply set your foreground color to a color. Let's say we want to draw a green shape. Let's go ahead and grab a green here. Let's create a new layer. And we're going to drag out a green rectangle. It just gives us a straight pixel rectangle on a new layer. And you might think, great, this is exactly what I need. This is amazing. And it is pretty amazing, and it's cool and all of that. But there's nothing else you can really do with it at this point. You can't, if you need to adjust it, you can't go and quickly adjust it to an exact pixel shape or size or anything like that, quite like you can a shape layer. So let's talk about the shape layers. Go back to the rectangle tool and choose shape layer from the drop-down menu. Now, well, first of all, you can just click once, and it's going to say, hey, what size would you like it to be? So you can choose an exact size right off the bat, or like you had before, you can click and drag out a shape. Now, just like the selection tools, if you hold down Shift, it's going to constrain it to a perfect square. If you hold down the Alt, well, if you click and drag and then hold down the Alt or Option key, it's going to drag out from the center. All right, now it's going to fill this with kind of like a gray from the background because I set my foreground color to gray when I sampled that background color. So let's go back to our greens. There we go, something like that. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to click in, just click once, and I'm going to say, all right, let's make this 1200 pixels wide by 700 pixels tall, hit OK, and we get a nice little rectangle. Now that we've done that, we get our Properties panel that opens up. Well, here in the Properties panel, we can quickly change the width or height. We say, oh, you know what, I actually wanted it to be 1400 by 880. All right, we can do that. We can adjust where it sits, the X and Y of the document. So we could say we really want it to be 500 pixels, the X-axis, and maybe 500 as well on the Y-axis. So it's 500 pixels out from that top corner now. We can give it a stroke if we like. So we could give it like a bright blue stroke of 30 points, larger or smaller, something like that. We can change the fill very, very easily. We could go with a hot pink. I'm going to stick with my green, though. We can say, hey, stroke, we actually want you to be on the outside so we can see all of the green. So it flips the stroke to the outside part of our path. See, the path is that little, all those dots, and the path is connecting all the dots together to make, you got it, a shape. You can choose things like mitered edges and how the ends of the path work, but you can also round the corners of your rectangle. So we can say, like a 50 pixel round on the corners. Now, if you uncheck the link, you can actually make certain corners more round than others. So we can make like this corner 150 and this corner like 250, and we can create kind of these funky shapes, again, very, very quickly with this shape tool, and we can always go and change the fill, change the stroke, anything you like. I'm going to drag the Properties panel back over here, push it back into that area where it belongs. You can also double-click. And by the way, notice it automatically created a new layer. It's got this little icon. This icon is just telling us, hey, look, this is a shape layer. We can double-click on the icon, or the layer thumbnail, excuse me, and it's going to open up our color picker. We can change the color at this point. Maybe we need a deeper green, something like that. Hit OK, and there we go. We have a nice green rectangle with rounded corners. The shape tools are incredibly deep. There is so much to them, so much that can go right and so much that can go wrong with them. I can't really dive into all of it right now. This tutorial, trust me, is going to be long enough. But just know there's so much to them. Let's talk about the quick common mistake that you're going to see and probably run into. So like I said, if you hold down the Shift key and you drag out a square, you can get a perfect square. But look what happened. I dragged that out. It messed up my stroke because it's too close to the shape next to it, so the strokes would overlap. But it's doing that because look over here. It didn't create a new shape layer. It simply added to the shape layer. Why? Well, because I held down the Shift key before I started dragging. If I start dragging and I get, a wacky freeform rectangle, and then I hold down Shift and make it a square, it's going to create a new shape layer. So what's happening is holding down the Shift key, just like when we added to our rectangular marquee selection, Photoshop is saying, okay, you don't want a perfect square, you want to add to the shape layer. So holding down Shift adds to the shape layer instead of creating a new shape layer with a perfect square. So you want to start first by clicking and dragging, and then hold down the Shift key, and you'll create a new shape layer and avoid all kinds of frustration along the way. All right, now next up we have the power of the Type tool. Let's jump in and check it out. All right, so the Type tool, it's located over here in your toolbox, just the big letter T. It's your Type tool, and it's going to place text in your document with whatever color you have selected up here in your control bar. So I can select this green and say, you know what, I really just need like white, or maybe actually if we hover out over the image, we can sample this bright yellow from the front side of our, this is a clownfish, I think, or something, maybe something like that. Let's drag out a text box like that, and let's type, this is a clownfish. There we go, and then we can hit the little check icon up here to commit our change. Now, this text has been modified a little bit because over here under my character panel, and by the way, if you don't have it, again, just go Window, Character, we've done some things to this text. So number one, we've chosen a typeface called League Spartan. We've selected this little icon and this icon. This is like a faux boldness. You can see it just makes your text a little more bold. I'm going to uncheck that. We also have turned this on. This makes your type all caps. Every letter will be a capital letter, even if you didn't type it that way. And we also gave it some distance between the letters. So, kerning, tracking, all that. Yeah, they call it tracking for the selected characters. So it's, the width between your letters. You can adjust the actual width of the letters. You can adjust the line height. A lot of things in here that you don't want to neglect. And that's kind of the common mistake that I see. A lot of people, they just take the text that they've been given. They don't tweak it or adjust it. Sometimes your text needs to be a little taller, maybe a little wider, or something like that. You can do superscripts and subscripts and all kinds of stuff. I mean, just come in here and play around with this. It's amazing. I am going to increase the distance between my letters. And you can see, there we go. That's great. I'm going to drag this back over and place it back where it belongs. Now, another thing, you can open up the paragraph panel by going Window, Paragraph. And the paragraph panel is what's going to allow you to align your text. Now, this text will align within the box that we created. So if I center align it, you can see it simply takes it to the center of the box we created. Then I can check and commit that change, and that's great. Now, one of the other cool things, well, cool, I guess, somewhat janky things, I guess, is this warp text feature in Photoshop. And it allows you to do some stuff with your text, like, apply an arc and just do some stuff like that. I don't know. I honestly, I don't think I've ever used this in any kind of meaningful way, but it allows you to do all kinds of different things to your type that might be fun, and it remains a live type layer. Now, if you want to go in and edit the type, you can grab your text tool, right, and you can just click on a block of text, and it's going to allow you to enter the block of text and edit it or add or subtract whatever you want from the text. Or you can simply double-click the T in your Layers panel, and it's going to automatically highlight all of the text in the text block that you have and allow you to go in there and retype or do whatever you want with it. Now, a neat little trick with the type layers is you can quickly change the color of type. Let's say we want to change this to, like, I don't know, a hot pink/red. If you have the type layer selected, you can use that Fill hotkey, Alt, Backspace, or Option Delete, and it's going to automatically fill your type with whatever your foreground color is. So that's kind of neat. I'm going to undo that, though, get me back to the yellow. And as I said a second ago, it's just all of this stuff in here about, tracking and kerning and line height, sizing up your font, changing the font, adjusting the size of the font. That I think is the common mistake that I'll see with type. Picking out an appropriate typeface and getting the sizing of your type correct is so imperative when it comes to graphic design and even just web design. I mean, nowadays web design is a lot of flat design, a lot of typography. Getting that stuff right in your designs makes the design go from being to so right. So take the time to get the text right, find good font pairings, and you're absolutely going to fall in love with the stuff you design. All right, I'm going to come over here to the muscular cows image. Let's talk about adjustment layers. So one of the things that I harp on a lot, if you watch any of my other tutorials, and if you haven't, what are you waiting for? One of the things that I harp on is non-destructive editing. Now, adjustment layers allow us to non-destructively edit our images and graphics in a very peculiar way and in a very powerful way. Let's take a look and compare how to make a black and white image with a standard adjustment and with an adjustment layer. So I'm going to first things first, duplicate my background layer. So click and drag and drop it on the new layer icon, and there we go. We have a second layer. I'm going to select the original background, and we can go Image Adjustments, and you can see we have all these amazing adjustments, and they are super powerful. I love them to death. We got all kinds of cool things we can do here. Let's just choose a black and white adjustment here, and say, let's darken the sky, maybe make the greens and the yellows and the reds. Let's darken the reds, actually. So we darken the reds up a little bit. There we go. Let's make the sky really dark and make the grass and the trees a little bit brighter. All right, hit OK. Once we've applied that black and white adjustment layer, we've got a cool black and white image, and it's there. We can see it in our layers panel. It's a black and white image, and it's done. We save our PSD, and remember, your PSD is your working file. So when you save this, your black and white image is locked in. It's good to go. It's there. The problem is, what if the client doesn't want a black and white image? And this is your copy of the photo. Well, you've just made it a black and white photo, so you either need to go re-download your stock photo and bring it into the project you're working on. It's much ado about not very much, and an adjustment layer does this, allows you to change this, and so much more. Let's check it out. Let's turn our copied layer on, and up here in the adjustments panel, you have all these different icons. This one right here, the black and white swatch, is the black and white adjustment layer. So these all correspond to all of these adjustments up here in the adjustments section. So brightness, contrast, levels, curves, yada, yada, yada. These are all those commands as separate layers. And look at this. It actually creates a new layer. I can shut this layer off, and I still have my color image preserved beneath it. I can turn it on. I can double-click on the thumbnail, and it opens the properties. So once again, I can just go, reduce the brightness of the blue channel, boost the greens, boost the yellows, darken the reds a little bit. I get this cool black and white image. I save my image. I come back a week, a month, a year later, and I can always shut that adjustment layer off. Or I can do stuff like reduce the opacity of that adjustment layer. If I just want to mute all the colors and tones in this image, I can apply a layer blend mode. I can do something like overlay, and it gives me this crazy, look at what it does for the contrast. It boosts the living daylights out of the contrast, and I say, hey, that's too much contrast. I can just reduce the layer opacity. So using a black and white adjustment layer, not only do I non-destructively edit the image, but it doesn't even necessarily have to be a black and white image. I can use a black and white adjustment layer to give me this additional boost in contrast and punch for my image, and then really dial it in by using the opacity slider. So that's the beauty of your adjustment layers. You can apply multiple adjustment layers. You could throw a gradient map on this, and it gives us this crazy color effect. You could use color balance and hue saturation and everything under the moon, as long as the cow doesn't jump over the moon. That was a really, really bad joke. But you can apply these adjustment layers. You can stack them all up, and they're all non-destructive. And that's so super important and so useful and so great when you come back to the image later and you decide, you know what, this effect is positively over the top. We want to get rid of the gradient map. There we go. You know what, we don't even like the contrast. Just the delete key, and you delete the adjustment layer just like that. So I'd have to say the common mistake with adjustment layers is not using adjustment layers. It's going to that image adjustments command panel there and just saying, hey, I need levels or I need curves, and throwing it on your image and applying it as a permanent destructive effect instead of just simply using the adjustment layer, which does exactly what it does, but applies it in a non-destructive way and allows you to do so much more. We didn't even touch everything that adjustment layers can do. We're going to do that right now because we're going to talk about masking. And masking for adjustment layers and a ton of other things is so super important and so incredible. So let's go over here to, let's go to this photo here of the kids studying again. And let's say we want to, you know what, actually, let's go to the boat in clear water. Let's do this. Let's say we want to change the color of this image. So I'm going to go hue saturation adjustment layer, and I'm going to boost the saturation a lot. And I'm going to make... I'm going to make it very blue. So the key thing here is we just want this boat to be this deep blue. We don't want our sky to look so crazy. We don't want the water to look so crazy. We want to change the blue from this very light blue on the boat to a much more, darker type blue. So here's the long and short of how masking works. When you have a mask applied to something like this, an adjustment layer, or even just a layer with a graphic or a photo on it, when the mask is solid white, it is showing everything. This entire hue saturation effect is showing. If I fill the mask with black, set my foreground color to black, and fill the mask with black using Alt Backspace, Option Delete on the Mac, you're going to see it's going to take us back to our original image. If I shut off the hue saturation adjustment layer and turn it back on, there's absolutely no difference because a mask filled with black is hiding everything on that layer. If we fill the mask with like a very dark gray, so let's set our foreground color to something like this very dark gray, and then we fill our mask with that, it's going to show through some of the hue saturation adjustment layer. So think of it on a scale of pure white shows through the hue saturation adjustment layer at like 100% opacity. Full black shows it at 0% opacity. Every ascending shade of gray, light gray might be like 10%, and then it gets a little darker and it's 20% opaque, or I'm sorry, light gray would be like 90% opacity, and by the time you get to like a very dark gray, it might only be like 10% opacity is showing through. So depending on how much you want to show or hide an effect, you can fill it with, a very dark gray or a very light gray. That's not a very practical way of working with masks, though, because typically you're brushing or, creating a selection and filling that area. So let's talk about that a little bit more. By the way, I'll just shut off hue saturation. There's before and there's after. You can see it is starting to make a change to our image because it's not full black. Let's fill this mask with full black, though, because we want to hide the entire bit. And here of the original layer, I'm just going to load here. I've got a very, very rough selection of the original boat. In fact, I'm going to take my lasso tool and just get rid of all the junk out here that is selecting. And I'm just holding down my Alt or Option key and just dragging out a very wide swath over any little marching ants that I see. It's a very, very rough selection. It's not even close to being perfect, but this is just to kind of show you guys how this works. Go back to the hue saturation adjustment layer, make sure you select the layer mask, and we would simply fill our selection with white. So we're going to set our foreground color to white by hitting those little side-to-side arrows. Alt, Backspace, Option, Delete. We fill it with white. Command or Control D to deselect. And you can see, if we hold down Alt and click on a mask, by the way, you show the alpha channel of the mask. It's just like showing the black and white, so you can see exactly what's black, what's white. You can see we got a little bit of gray here in the middle of our mask. And then hold down Alt or Option, click the mask again to get back to your image. You can see that only the areas of the mask that are white, that's the only part of the hue saturation adjustment layer that's sort of shining through. You can see there's before, there's after. So we're constraining our hue saturation adjustment layer only to that area, only to the boat. Now, the beautiful thing about masks is not only can you go and edit them anytime you want, but that is the beautiful thing about masks, is the fact that you can go and edit them anytime you want. What am I saying? When you use the eraser tool, well, number one, you can't erase any part of an adjustment layer, so it would be relatively useless in terms of reining in or controlling an adjustment layer. But when you erase something, a piece of artwork, it's gone. When you mask it, when you paint black over that part of the artwork or whatever it is you're painting over with the mask, to bring it back, just paint white over it and you uncover it again. So masking is the quintessential, powerful, constraining tool in Photoshop. It's very much like the selection tool, but it is most powerful when it's paired with a selection tool. As you saw, I had made a selection of the boat using a different selection tool in Photoshop. We're not going to get into, sadly, in this tutorial. It's called Color Range if you want to look it up. But pairing a good selection tool with masking, you can achieve amazing results in Photoshop. Masking. Don't underestimate masking. When you start using masking, you're going to love it. It's so powerful. It's so useful. I can't say enough great things about masking. Now, the common mistake that you're going to see with masking, let's get back to this, is when you go to work on your mask, let's say I grab my brush tool and I want to paint with white. I'm going to right-click. I'm going to make it a very soft-edged brush. I want to paint with white. I want to show, maybe change the color of some of these darker patches of water, roughly. And if you have the layer selected, it's going to try to paint on the layer. You need to make sure when you begin working with your mask, you actually click on the mask itself. And now we can paint with white. And you can see I can paint over this darker blue area of water. And now the mask is also affecting that part of our image. So again, use masking generously. It's an amazing feature in Photoshop. And you're absolutely going to love it. The more you use it, the more you're going to fall in love with it. And you're going to realize just how powerful masking really is. Oh, and I should mention, you can both delete a mask and temporarily disable a mask. So you can simply drag a mask down to the garbage, and Photoshop's going to say, hey, would you like to delete the layer mask? I would say delete if you want to get rid of it, or no if you don't want to get rid of it. And you can disable it to see what the mask is doing by just holding down the Shift key and clicking on that mask. So I'm holding down Shift, click it, you see it gets the red X, and it shows our image as if there was no mask on our hue saturation adjustment layer. Hold down Shift and click it again to bring the mask back. Voila, there we have our image with a masked adjustment layer. So now let's talk about filters in Photoshop. I'm actually not a huge fan of filters, but there are some super useful filters that can be used in Photoshop. Here we've got this beautiful photo of Istanbul, and we're going to talk about filters. So filters can be found here under the Filters menu, as you may well imagine, and I just want to cover a couple important things. Very important. Anytime you can, you're going to want to convert for smart filters. Converting for smart filters is basically going to convert your layer into a smart object. Hit OK. So you're going to see a little icon will appear, and you now have a smart object. Now, smart objects, you want to learn about these things. They're pretty important in Photoshop. We're not going to cover smart objects in depth here. Very powerful, very important feature in Photoshop. I feel like I'm saying that a lot today, but it's true. There are a lot of really important features in Photoshop. Smart objects in particular are really, really useful and can do a lot of really amazing things for you. But in terms of filters, check this out. So let's say this photo of Istanbul, we want to go ahead and go blur, Gaussian blur, which is one of the more used features in Photoshop. And we say, let's blur this by like 75 pixels, hit OK. And then we realize, shoot, you know what? That's way too much. I can't even tell what this is anymore. Well, because it's a smart filter, you can click the little fly down menu or pop out menu, whatever you want to call it. You can double click on Gaussian blur, and you can reduce the amount of blur. Hit OK, and you can go back in and reduce the amount of blur whenever you like. Also note, there is a mask, and this works just like any mask for the filter. So if I fill the mask with black here, right, the whole blurring filter goes away. If I set my foreground color to white and I paint like over this part of the city, you're going to see just that part of the city and maybe the foreground here. If I want to create sort of a fake, sort of like a fake tilt shift effect for the bridge, you can see we blur everything but this little part of the bridge. It looks pretty terrible, admittedly. But, you know, the point is you have the ability to go in and even mask your filters when you use smart filters. Not only can you can grab the Gaussian blur if you decide you don't like it, drag it to the garbage, and it's gone. Smart filters. Always convert for smart filters before you start playing with filters. Now, the common mistake I see when folks are using filters is using most of the filters, quite frankly, up here in the filter gallery. They're just really bad. Now, there are some usages for them, but most of them are pretty awful. They can be cool to go in and play around and look at, but honestly, the practical use for a lot of these is very limited. I know some artists use them, maybe some abstract artists. There are different special effects that things like plastic wrap, sponge, some of the texturizing features will allow you and help you with. But for the most part, most of the time I see a lot of these filters being used, it's just really bad, and they're not really, it's not the greatest way to go about creating artwork in Photoshop. The filter gallery, an overuse of the filter gallery would be what I would say the common mistake is when it comes to using filters in Photoshop. Now, staying here with this photo of Istanbul, let's talk about transforming photos or objects. Let's just duplicate the photo of Istanbul. I'm going to hit Command or Control J. We've duplicated a smart object. Great. I'm going to apply an adjustment layer. I'm going to rasterize this. I'm actually going to break a couple rules here. I'm going to right-click, and I'm going to choose Rasterize Layer. That sort of unsmart objectifies it a little bit. Let's instead try a gradient map. And with a gradient map, what we're going to do is we're going to choose a black to white gradient, hit OK, and we've got kind of a cool, moody black and white image. Now, obviously, if I resize this layer, or even if I move this layer, because this adjustment layer, using an adjustment layer is just like pouring paint down your layers panel. So this adjustment layer is going to affect not only my new layer, but also the layer beneath. I don't want that to happen. I want this adjustment layer only to target this top layer. So I'm going to hold down my Alt-Option key, hover between the two layers until I see that little icon appear. Click once, and it's going to do what's called clipping. It's going to clip the adjustment layer to this layer. That means the adjustment layer will only target and affect this top layer. You can see here if I move this layer, the photo underneath still completely unscathed, very much not black and white. All right, so now we've basically set our image to begin playing with Free Transform. That took a couple minutes, but hey, we picked up maybe a couple new little tips and tricks along the way. Free Transform. You select the layer. We don't need to select the adjustment layer. Go Edit, transform, or just straight free transform. Note the hotkey, Command or Control T. It's an important one. Free transform. You get these handles that appear around your image. Now, this allows you to grab any corner of that layer and resize it. Now, obviously, this can be super useful. You can resize and drag it anywhere you want. I'm going to undo that. In fact, because I've moved it around now and I've lost my original perspective, I can look up here to width and height and see, okay, 83% by 57%. How do I get my original aspect ratio? Well, we're just going to go 100% width by 100% height. Hey, we're back to normal. Great. That's a good way just when you haven't committed your changes and you hit the check icon to commit changes. Now, if you hold down your Shift key, you resize but constrain the proportions of your original image. So, like, here we go. And again, we're using Smart Guides here, and you can see... Let's drop it there. We're automatically, there we go. We're in the perfect center of our colored photo of Istanbul in the background. So we've now brought it to the middle. We've resized it. Now, we can resize and scale it to the center, or not really to the center, but to this little target point by holding down the Alt or Option key. I'm going to hold down Alt or Option and Shift, in fact, so I can scale down toward that point and maintain my original aspect ratio. There we go. We have our image just like that. Now, you can also rotate any image by just moving outside of your transform box. You get sort of that rotating arrow. You can rotate. If you hold down the Shift key, you can rotate 15 degrees at a time. You can see there's a perfect 45-degree angle. There's perfectly 90 degrees, and so on and so forth. That can be useful when you need to exactly rotate something. You can always right-click, and you can choose any of the other transform options: scale, rotate, skew. So skew, you can see, is going to give us kind of this effect. Whoa, hey, what's going on? All right. I'm going to undo the skew. In fact, I'm going to hit the cancel button to not commit any of those changes. I'm going to hit Command or Control T to enter into free transform once more. Hold down Shift and Alt, scale my image down. You can right-click. You can choose perspective, right? And perspective allows you to sort of, whoa, lay the image flat like that. You can pull this part out, right? Then you could right-click and choose scale and push the bottom up a little bit. Let me pull this just a little bit closer, and you sort of get this perspective effect, which is kind of neat. You can rotate straight up 180 degrees, or 90 degrees counter, or just regular old clockwise. You can also flip horizontal or vertical. So I'm going to show you what we're going to use that for in a second. I'm going to not commit those changes. Once more, Command or Control T. Let's just size this down, all right? Commit that change. Let's maybe blur Istanbul a little bit for the background image. So again, this is a smart filter, non-destructive, blur, Gaussian blur, and let's go with, I don't know, 8 or 10 pixels. There we go, 8 pixels is cool. And then we're going to free transform our background layer. Command or Control T. It's going to say, look, smart filters applied. They're going to be turned off temporarily. Okay, that's fine. We know they're coming back. Right-click on this and choose to flip horizontal. So we're flipping the photo of Istanbul around in the background. Commit that change. You're going to see it's going to blur it again. So now we kind of have this neat border or so around our black and white photo of Istanbul. Now, once more, if we enter into free transform, I'm working on the black and white image. You can see this now registers as the new 100 pixel width and height of the image. We can scale this up. Let's say it needs to be 75% of the size. You can actually make it a perfect 75% of the size you see. That's pretty cool. Let's commit that change, in fact. Let's make it a little bit smaller. I kind of like that. Now, one of the common mistakes I would say is, we're going to enter back into free transform, what do you know, not taking advantage of repositioning this center point. So the center point is in the center by default, but you can use the little toggle switch up here to maybe push it all the way to the right-hand side and in the center. See, now it's over there. Why is this important? Well, if you want to, like, flip the image, and let me show you the kind of effect you can create with this. Let's just go ahead and commit this change. Let's duplicate this black and white layer. Command or Control J, all right? Now go Command or Control T again. Let's choose to set the center point or the anchor reference point to the middle right-hand side, and then right-click and choose Flip Horizontal. The image is going to flip based upon that anchor point. So it's going to flip the image out to that side and sort of almost join the images together and create this kind of wacky effect. Now, the reason that this image, or the background image, is no longer black and white is because the gradient map is only clipping itself to our flipped image. So I'm going to undo all of this. That was just to give you an example of what that center point can do. So don't neglect the center reference point. There's so much you can do with it as far as, you know, zooming in and out based on like a top left corner or something like that. There's really a lot you can do with it. It can be super useful, especially as you advance in Photoshop and maybe you start working with images where perspective becomes important. You can set like that reference point on your horizon, on your vanishing point, and you can scale to and from this vanishing point, and really it just becomes a really, really useful thing to have. So Don't forget to tweak and adjust that center reference point when you're using Free Transform. Free Transform it's really useful. It's something you're going to use a lot, and it's kind of even a deep tool, which is why I've spent a few minutes here talking about it. So don't sleep on Free Transform. It's a helpful one. So let's jump over here to the boat image. I've deleted the hue saturation adjustment layer. Let's talk about cropping, specifically the crop tool. So I'm going to change the crop tool to just original ratio, and we have, you can see here, these little handles that appeared. We can grab these handles and drag them in any which way, and we can crop our image. Now you drag the image beneath the crop, and you can kind of reposition and recompose your shot, if you will. Maybe set the image like that. We can check it, and there we go. We've recropped our image. I'm going to undo that. Cropping is literally that fast and easy. A couple cool things about the crop tool are you can set a specific ratio. Note I just went to original ratio, and what happened was Photoshop is going to force me to stick to the original ratio of this image. You can see I can't push straight up from the bottom. If I do that, it's going to pull the sides in as well because it's going to force me to stick with that original ratio. Now, if I just hit the clear button, now I can just drag a freeform crop wherever I like and crop the image however I so desire. And, let's say I, drag this out. We want to place it kind of like that. Hit the check icon to commit the change. Great. Now, one of the cool things about the crop tool is you can choose to delete the cropped pixels or not. This is why the crop tool can really be a non-destructive cropping tool, because all those original pixels are still saved. They just won't be, exported. Remember before when we were talking about file types and exporting a JPEG or a PNG or whatever it is, when we export this JPEG, we're just going to see this bit here that we've cropped. But in the PSD, we still have all of those other pixels. So if we click once with the crop tool is going to load up, and we're going to see all of the rest of that image. So if we decide, we actually need to include more of the foreground, we can do that and hit the check icon, and voila, we have adjusted the crop, and we have our new image. Another great thing about the crop tool is, let's say we have the image like this. Let's commit the crop, and obviously the horizon line is very crooked because we made it crooked. You can choose the straighten ruler and draw a line across something in the image that should be straight, and it's going to load up your crop tool and automatically straighten the image. And then you can go ahead and commit your change, and you straighten the image and crop the image all at once. Now, you can choose a specific width and height as well. This is an effective way to resize your image while cropping. Let's say I want to use this image as like a thumbnail for a YouTube video. I can set it to 1920 by 1080 pixels. I can hover over whatever I want to crop, commit the change, and it's going to both crop and resize my image. In fact, if I go image size, which is another way to resize images, by the way, punch in manually the pixels you want, you can see, in fact, it is an image now, 1920 by 1080. I'm going to undo that. One of the common mistakes I'll see with cropping is people simply taking the rectangular marquee tool, hovering or drawing a selection over what you want to crop, and going image crop. It's a very bad way to crop. It's a very destructive way to crop because all those pixels are gone. They're out of there. You can't get them back. You save this image. You close the file. They're gone. You would have to drag in the image and restart if you've done a bunch of retouching or color changes or whatever it may be to this photo. Whereas using the crop tool, if you don't delete the pixels, you can save it. You can come back again days, weeks, months, whatever later, and you can recrop, recompose, readjust, and everything is there, much like you would have in an application like Lightroom. Non-destructive cropping is a must. All right, so all throughout this tutorial, you've seen me undoing stuff. And undoing is a huge part of Photoshop. That whole Command-Z, Control-Z, it's a hotkey you're going to get familiar with. Now, the problem, or the quirky thing I should say about Photoshop, is undo only really steps you back one step. Let me explain here. Let's take the brush tool, and let's take kind of an obscene color, maybe just a big orange brush, and paint one. Let's make it a hard edge brush. Hard edge brush, paint 1, 2, 3 dots. Right? If we hit Command or Control Z, it takes away the last dot we painted. If we hit Command or Control Z again, it replaces that dot. What's happening? Well, here's what's happening. When you go Edit Undo Brush Tool, and you go back, Command Z automatically turns into this Redo Brush Tool command. So that's why Command Z undoes the brush, but then it also redoes the brush. So Command Z is good for stepping back once, but then you need to use the hotkey Command Option Z or Control Alt Z. What that does is it steps backward. And the reason it's called stepping backward is because you're over here in the history panel and you're stepping back a history state. So if I go back to brush tool here, you can see there's that brush tool. If I step back once, we only have one brush tool. I step back again and we have no brush tool or no brush dabs on our Photoshop document. So when you're working with the history state and undoing in Photoshop, the Command or Control Z is a vital hotkey, but you need to remember the Command Option Z or Control Alt Z if you're on PC, so you can continue stepping backward in your history panel and undo multiple things in a row. Now, a common mistake with the history panel, or just undoing in general, and this may seem kind of stupid, but it's a lifesaver, is up here under the preferences again. And let's go down here to performance, is you want to change your history states from the default of, I don't know, what is it, 10 or 12 or 25? I don't even remember. Crank this up, 50, 100, something like that. That way you can undo many, 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 many times and really take advantage of the whole history panel and the idea of undoing in Photoshop. You'll be surprised, even with 50 history states, how quickly, using the brush tool, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, how quickly 50 adds up. So if your computer can handle it, crank that thing way up. So change and edit the number of history states you have in Photoshop, preferences, performance. You won't regret it as long as you have a decent amount of RAM in your computer. All right, so next up, let's talk about saving, exporting, and a few different file types, and let's get through this quickly because this is the 15th thing and this tutorial. Look at it. It's taken long enough, right? So what we have here, I just applied a couple adjustment layers, made a couple changes to this photo, maybe added a little mid-tone punch to a little richness, a little contrast, all that. Let's talk about saving as a PSD. So you can save as a PSD by going File, Save As, and from the format here, Photoshop is a .psd. So when we save it as a .psd, we can open it back up in Photoshop. We'll have all of our layers intact, and we can do with it as we wish. Now, if you want to choose a different format, you can come into here and just choose JPEG or PNG or whatever you want from this, a TIFF file. There's a bunch of different large document format. There's a lot of different file types in here that you can choose. Typically, I'm going Photoshop or JPEG. Now, the JPEG that you save out is not a very optimized JPEG, and that's putting it kindly. So if we want to save this out for the web, not only will we want to resize the photo or the PSD or the image or whatever, but we would save it out a little bit differently. Let's explore that right now. So we could save this JPEG if we're just using it for a project where file size doesn't matter right now. Go ahead and save the highest quality JPEG you possibly can. But if we're saving it for the web and sharing on the web, we want to do it a little bit differently. So we go File, Export, and choose Export As. The Export As dialog box is going to appear, and it's going to say, look, here's your image. Great. We got sizing options. That has to do with some web graphic stuff and Retina displays. You can 2x and 3x and 1.5x or whatever you want your image. You can choose the format you want to save it in. And when you're saving for the web, typically you got your SVG graphics, your PNG graphics, your JPEGs, and your GIF files. GIF files, GIF files, whatever we want to call it. I'm going to roll with JPEG since this is a photo. For the most part, you're not going to go with PNG when you've got a large photo like this. So we're going to go JPEG. You can adjust the image size right here. Now, this is important because a moment ago I said change the size of your PSD. Well, remember, your PSD is your working file. So if you don't want to change the size of your PSD and you just want to change the size of the file on export, you can do that. So you can say, all right, I really only need this file to be 1900 pixels wide. So it's going to scale it. You can see 45.71%. You can even choose the way it's sampling out of Photoshop to get the highest quality. That's basically choosing the algorithm that Photoshop is going to use to size up or down depending on the options you punch in. And the more you become acquainted with Photoshop, the more you're going to realize certain algorithms work better for resizing or for building up, what's it called? Enlarging. That's the word I'm looking for. Enlarging a photo. So certain algorithms are better for enlarging. Certain algorithms are better for downsizing. Bicubic automatic is a good one to go with because Photoshop will kind of automatically choose what it thinks is best. You can choose to embed metadata, blah, blah, blah. We're not getting into that here. Color space is the same thing. Don't worry about that. So once you do that, you can choose Export All. And Photoshop's going to say, hey, where would you like to save it? I'm just going to say, right here in this folder is a Photoshop Cafe, and we're going to say -II for like version 2. Choose Export, and voila, it's going to be, Photoshop is going to open up the folder for us here as we see, and here's Woman in Cafe -2, and there's the original image. So you can very quickly save out a JPEG. Now, let's talk about something else real quick. I'm going to just minimize that. Let's go to the boat image again, actually, and I'm just going to resize this image. I'm going to make it pretty small, 1,000 pixels wide. Hit OK. Now, sometimes when you're exporting web graphics, especially, you want a transparent background. I'm going to unlock my background layer here, and I'm going to break some rules here. I'm just going to use the eraser tool, and we're just going to put a big old circle, wablam, right there in the middle. Maybe that's a little bit too big. a big circle right there in the middle. How do I export and maintain transparency with a graphic? Well, you need to export as a PNG. A GIF can also handle transparency, but PNG is like the high quality, photo quality graphic. It's a bit bigger in the file size department, but let's check it out. So we go File, Export, Export As, and you can see here, if I export this as a JPEG, my hole just gets filled with, you know, the color white. I almost slipped there and said something really bad. Let's go JPEG, or let's go PNG, I'm sorry. And you can see we can tick on transparency. We shut it off, and of course it's white. But you want to tick it on so you can preserve transparency. Now, there is an option here for a smaller 8-bit PNG file. The 8-bit PNG files tend to be pretty bad in terms of the quality of the image that's exported. You probably want to stick with the 24-bit PNG, which is like your default PNG. The file is going to be a little bit larger, but it's going to be worth it because the quality is going to be so much better. And then same thing, you just go export all, choose where you want to save it, and you're going to save a .png. So you can export out a plethora of file types via export as or just saving as and choosing the file that you want to save out of Photoshop. And oh, by the way, the common mistake here is choosing a PNG-8 to save file size and not realizing the damage that it will wreak or the havoc it will wreak on your beautiful photo, especially if it's a photo that you're exporting with, really a photo or anything with gradients, I should say, that you're exporting that has transparency. You really want to stick with the default PNG, the PNG-24 as it used to be known in the old Save for Web dialog box in Photoshop. So that's really it. That's saving, exporting, and talking about file types in Photoshop and how to get your stuff from PSD to where you can save it on the web. And that's really all of that stuff. 15 concepts that I really tried to dive into, that I really wanted to share a few minutes, you know, some of them 5, 6, 7 minutes per item in Photoshop. This is a long tutorial, but consider this a full course, a zero to hero. Jump into Photoshop 2 hours ago or longer. You knew far less about Photoshop, and now you have a better grasp of the program. If you have questions, please leave a comment below. I'll do my best to go in and answer questions where I can. Hopefully, people in the comments will be kind enough to give you some support and help you with your problem in Photoshop. Make sure you smash the like button for this video. Also, share this video if you have friends. Share it on Facebook. Share it with friends who you think could use some Photoshop help, or just on social media in general. It all helps this video go up. And going up is what I like. So for 15 incredible concepts and features and tool sets in Photoshop that are going to help you and be a beginner's guide, they're going to take you up, 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 up. That's it. Get it? Got it? Good. Nathaniel Dodson, Tutvid.com. I'll catch you in the next one.
Have you ever thought about the fact that there was a point in your life where your parents picked you up and put you down and never picked you up again? Like, ever picked you up again? That's crazy to think about. Go ahead and hit the like button for this video. Also, subscribe to my channel. Make sure you sign up for my newsletter. You get 30 free tips and tricks. It's a video delivered, bam, instantaneously, right to your inbox. Also, you can follow me on Snapchat. You can follow me on Instagram. You can follow me on Twitter. And you can follow me on Facebook. I'll catch you guys in the next video.